All right, folks. So we got one more segment on the night. This, in a way, the most troubling of them all. The scariest for last. Trump order targets pro-Palestinian activists to combat anti-Semitism. That's right. Donald Trump has signed an executive order to combat anti-Semitism, quote unquote, important, that asks agencies to explore ways to deport pro-Palestinian activists, including student protesters. The U.S. president's order instructs federal agencies to identify available civil and criminal authorities in order to combat anti-Semitism, specifically by deporting resident aliens, such as students with visas who were found to have broken the law during protests. Department and agency leaders will be required to provide recommendations to the White House within 60 days. It also instructs the Department of Justice to investigate, pro-Hamas graffiti and intimidation, including incidents on college campuses. The order appears to target students and other activists who engaged in pro-Palestinian demonstrations following the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th and the subsequent Israeli war in Gaza. So, in complement to the executive order, the White House, this is from the White House, put out a fact sheet. President Donald Trump takes forceful and unprecedented steps to combat anti-Semitism. So this is on the fact sheet. This is from the White House, from whitehouse.gov. Now, President Trump has promised that the federal government will protect the civil rights of our Jewish citizens. My promise to Jewish Americans is this: with your vote, I'll be your defender, your protector, and I'll be the best friend Jewish Americans have ever had in the White House. Aggressively enforce the law, protect public order, and prosecute anti-Semitic crimes, and then deport what he calls, of course, Hamas sympathizers and revoke student visas. To all the resident aliens who joined in the pro-jihadist protests, we put you on notice. Come 2025, we will find you and we will deport you. I will also quickly cancel the student visas of all Hamas sympathizers on college campuses, which have been infested with radicalism like never before. So as part of the fact sheet, it kind of broadens the aim of the executive order to suggest that if you participated in these protests at all, you are on the potential deportation list. Now, of course, you know, a lot of the chuds come out and say, well, if you're here on a visa, you don't have those rights. If you're an immigrant, if you're not an American citizen, you don't have First Amendment rights. Well, Glenn Greenwald took that point on pretty head on. So here he is laying out the case that, oh, no, actually, the Bill of Rights does govern how the government is supposed to treat anyone who's here, even on a visa.
I just want to address something that is a huge misconception among very well-read, educated, and perfectly intelligent people. But it's such a massive misconception. I was seeing it all day today in response to this executive order. People saying the United States Constitution only gives rights to American citizens. So if you're in the U.S. and you're a foreigner and you're here on a work visa to study or to work or a student visa to study, the Constitution doesn't apply to you. The government can do whatever they want to you. This is completely and indisputably false. First of all, the Bill of Rights is not really a document that gives rights to individuals. It's a document that constrains what the government can do with respect to how it acts on American soil.
Exactly. That's a very civil libertarian argument, but it's a very good argument. It's a very good argument. It doesn't grant rights to people. This is a classic libertarian argument. I mean, you would hear this from, Judge Knapp, who's great on speech issues and the Israel issue, for that matter. Great on a lot of issues. Yes, this interpretation that the Bill of Rights does not grant rights, but rather restrains the government from violating inalienable rights.
And there have always been people in the United States who are not American citizens who are in the United States legally. Obviously, you can't just take those people and throw them into prison forever without a trial. They have due process rights, and this is not even in doubt. Here's a Supreme Court ruling from
right now.
I believe let's check the date. I think it's 1880. It says 1886. That may be correct. It's called Yick Wo versus Hopkins. Basically, a Chinese national, not an American citizen, a Chinese national was convicted of a crime in California. He appealed by arguing that his rights to due process under the Constitution had been violated. And the Supreme Court accepted the appeal, overturned the Constitution, and said that his rights of due process had been violated, even though under the Constitution, even though he's not an American citizen. And here's what the court in the 19th century said when resolving this question, quote, the rights of the petitioners as affected by the proceedings of which they complained are not less because they are aliens and subjects of the Emperor of China. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution is not confined to the protection of citizens. It says, quote, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the law. These provisions are universal in their application to all persons within the territorial jurisdiction without regard to any differences of race, of color, of nationality, and the equal protection of the laws is a pledge of the protection of equal laws. The question we have to decide and consider in these cases, therefore, are to be treated as involving the rights of every citizen of the United States equally with those of strangers and aliens who now invoke the jurisdiction of the court. The Constitution limits what the U.S. government can do with respect to any territory where the U.S. government is sovereign. If you're here in the United States illegally, that's a different question. Summary deportation is permissible under the Constitution. But if you're in the United States legally and you're not a U.S. citizen, you're here because of a work visa or a student visa, you absolutely have the rights under the Constitution. This is not some radical left-wing modern theory. This is something that has been foundational to the way the U.S. government has worked forever.
There you go. So he lays that out very, very well. So all of the hogs online who say, well, you know, if you're a guest in our house, you got to play by our rules and we'll kick you out. No, that's not true.
Yeah,
the First Amendment does apply to people who are here on student visas, which means you cannot simply kick them out for expressing a view that you find objectionable. You know who doesn't understand that subtlety is Betar US. So this is apparently a hyper-Zionist, a small organization. But they thought it would be a great idea to go and harass protesters, in this case at a vigil for Hind Rajab, who was shot, I believe, 355 times by Israeli gunmen. This beautiful little girl murdered in the most absolutely horrific way imaginable by the IDF. So there was a vigil planned for her in Zuccotti Park, which, for those who don't know, that is the site of the Occupy Wall Street protests in downtown Manhattan. But Betar said, join us at the Jihad rally as we assist ICE in deportation efforts. We will document all attendees, and even those in keffiyehs and masks will be identified thanks to Terror Watch 613. Betar will submit names of attendees to Real Donald Trump. Get out now. So there's the poster for the event, Wednesday, January 29th at 6:30. Now, these morons fucked up the date on their version of the poster. They were trying to recruit snitches. So they said Wednesday, January 28th at 6:30. So perhaps there was a mix-up and some of them did not show up. But they plan to come and try and get as many people as they can on the ICE registry for deportation. Real nice guys. And so we don't have any video as of yet from that night from the Betar account. I guess they were there undercover, right? Mm-hmm. Snooping around for immigrants that they're going to try and deport people on visas. But here's an example of some of their past work. So that's a recent rally. So he posted this to sort of tout some of what they've done in the past at these pro-Palestine rallies. That's a recent rally where we offered beepers.
Beepers! We got beepers! Need beepers? Anyone beepers? Anyone need beepers? We got beepers! Beepers? You want a beeper? Anybody?
Oh my God.
You guys want a beeper? You want a beeper? No? No? Where's the at, huh? Where's the at? Where's that girl at, huh? You want a beeper? Can I come? Let me come. They told me to come in. They're not letting me. You come here.
Look, the influence taking a picture of you. What up, influence?
What's up, guys? How we doing?
Take a beeper.
Beepers. Anybody? Roman, what the fuck you doing here?
Same. So you don't see the government making any kind of threats or taking any disciplinary actions against pieces of absolute garbage like that, do you? No.
Nope.
No.
Nope.
So Talia Jane, she's a independent journalist. So she replies, go to fucking therapy, you loser freaks. And this guy says, is that you? So apparently, and this is not one person who runs this Betar handle, as I understand. They're like a group. But here is an encounter that one of these people had with Talia Jane in the past. he posts this video in response.
Talia Jane is getting her medicine. You're getting a taste of your medicine now.
All right, guys. Come
You're
on.
getting a taste of your medicine. Tell her to leave. Turn around and walk away. You like that, right? I told you you're going to feel uncomfortable. Anywhere I go, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're not going to be comfortable anymore. You're not going to be comfortable anymore.
Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here now. Now. Get out of here. Get the fuck out of here.
You feel uncomfortable,
Get out
right?
the street. Get out.
Yep. So sort of posting that as a flex,
All right. First of all, why aren't the cops arresting that guy
Exactly.
for getting up in the face like that? That's one.
I'm saying everywhere
Two,
you go, you're going to be uncomfortable.
Hey. Where are all these? Where are all the wokies? Where are all the wokies? Last I heard, they get very upset about men speaking to women that way.
Right.
About
Yeah,
men
exactly.
using their toxic masculinity to intimidate women that way. Where are they? Where are they to cancel this guy?
Yeah. Yep. Not much to be heard. But of course, we don't have any video from those creeps about their presence this evening. But here is some of how the vigil for Hind Rajab went down. So there you go. That's some of the rally. Here's a video from the rally as well. Message to Gaza. Jewish people around the world stand with Palestine at the Vigil for Hind Rajab in Zuccotti Park, New York City. On the one-year anniversary of her martyrdom, Rabbi Yitzhak Deutsch shared a powerful message of solidarity.
We have gathered here in New York City for the vigil after the first year of the murder of the little child who was killed by the Zionist regime just for being Palestinian. We are standing now 1.5 weeks after the Palestinians in Gaza return to their homes and they find destruction, they find their homes in rubble, and they are digging in the rubble to find their relatives, which is heartbreaking. We as Jewish people, we are here with a message to the people of Gaza. The Jewish people around the world are standing with Palestine, and we will always stand with Palestine.
So thankfully, they were able to have their vigil in relative peace. As far as we know, as of this recording anyway, there were no unpleasant interactions with the Betar crew because they probably wanted to stay undercover that night since they were on a mission to find migrants and people on visas who they could deport. Well, at the new school, at a previous event, they were not so subtle. And this did not end well for the Betar guys. And so we're going to take a look at this video of their tactics, their not so subtle tactics at a previous pro-Palestine event.
No.
I have a beeper for you. Somebody wants a beeper? I have a beeper for you. You have a beeper? I have a beeper for you, sir. Here. Would you like a beeper? Have a beeper for you. No, why are you running away? Have a beeper for you. You're covering your face. Here. Have a beeper for you. Why are you covering your face?
Security.
Have a beeper for you. Here's a beeper. Why you don't have? Here's a beeper for you. Here's a beeper for you. Don't touch me. We're in New York City. Don't touch me, sir.
Don't
You're on
touch me.
private property. Get out. I'm
He
asking you
says
to leave
don't
the
touch me.
Beeper, sir.
I'm asking you to leave
Don't
the
put
building.
hands on me. You know you can.
So he goes around shoving beepers in their face, which is, of course, a threat. And then the security comes. He's like, don't touch me. Don't touch me. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine that? Well, so that is the state of speech now. The state of now, only made worse by this new order, which puts a target on the back of anyone who participated in those protests, especially if you are here on a visa. And to make matters even worse, like I said, none of this story gets better. Congressional Republicans finalized bill recognizing West Bank as Judea and Samaria. The U.S. should stop using politically charged term West Bank to refer to the biblical heartland of Israel, says Tom Cotton. This is from the Washington Free Beacon, who broke this story because they had some exclusive quotes from Cotton. I should show you here. So the tagline for the Washington Free Beacon is covering the enemies of freedom the way mainstream media won't. And their logo is apparently two bombs falling on each side of the Washington Free Beacon. Yeah. Yes, that is actually the logo of the publication.
Hang on, isn't that Glenn Beck's thing?
No, his is the Blaze.
The Blaze. That's
yeah. This has been around for a while, actually. A very, very right-wing site. I only use them because they had the exclusive quotes. Republicans in the House and Senate are finalizing legislation that would formally recognize the West Bank as Judea and Samaria, applying Israel's official term for the region to all American government communications, according to a copy of the bill obtained by the Washington Free Beacon. Led by Senator Tom Cotton and Representative Claudia Tenney, the Recognizing Judea and Samaria Act would prohibit government use of West Bank when referencing the territories around Jerusalem. Israel, which annexed the area in 1967, refers to it as the biblical Judea and Samaria, though the United States and international community avoid this term, viewing the region as home to a future Palestinian state. Yes, that's because the settlements are illegal under international law. That's why that they're not recognized, broadly speaking, as fucking Judea and Samaria. Sorry, folks. Getting sick, it's the end of the night. Judea and Samaria, pardon me. The bill from Cotton and Tenney, then, would upend decades of U.S. foreign policy and is reminiscent of the Trump administration's first-term push to recognize both Jerusalem and the Golan Heights territory near Lebanon as belonging to Israel. Congressional Republicans widely supported those declarations after pushing and failing for years to formalize similar policies through legislation. Quote, the Jewish people's legal and historic rights to Judea and Samaria goes back thousands of years, Cotton told the Free Beacon. The U.S. should stop using the politically charged term West Bank to refer to the biblical heartland of Israel. No, calling it Judea and Samaria isn't politically charged. Calling it the West Bank, that's politically charged. The legislation would erase the term West Bank from all government communications and laws, such as the Foreign Assistance Act of 1971. Now, this sounds like the kind of thing that Democrats might find the balls to vote against, since ultimately it's a virtue signal, right? You're talking about what the government recognizes as the West Bank versus Judea and Samaria. It needs 60 votes in the Senate to get through because it's not a budgetary matter. So the Democrats might be able to block this. This sounds like the kind of symbolic thing that they would block, to say, see, we stood up for the Palestinians and prevented the renaming of the West Bank, right? Unlike those mean Republicans, right, who helped us do the genocide, right? So there is some hope there. The reason this is kind of important is because when you have an administration that seems hell-bent on draconian speech enforcement around this issue, then these words do take on extra meaning, right? Because all they have to do is concoct a narrative where you are being sympathetic to the evil side. So if you don't use the right terminology, that puts you on our list, right? Now, like I said, maybe that'll be blocked. Maybe that won't. This legislation was brought up back in early December of 2024, much to the liking of Ben Shapiro. So let's hear what he thinks of this.
Senator Tom Cotton has put out a statement, a correct statement, a historically accurate statement, saying that it's time to call the so-called West Bank, Judea and Samaria, in America, which is right. The West Bank suggests that the territory that is to the west of the Jordan River is somehow sovereign Arab or Jordanian territory. That's why it's called the West Bank, right? Because the West Bank of the Jordan River. But that territory was lost by Jordan in the 1967 war. Israel has been in control of it ever since. There's only a 19-year period in which Jordan was ever in control of that territory between 1947 and 1967. And the notion of calling it by its historic actual name and its current name, Judea and Samaria, makes an awful lot of sense. He's introducing legislation to that effect. According to Cotton, the bill would require the use of historically accurate terminology and align U.S. policy language with the geographical and cultural significance of the region. He says the Jewish people's legal and historic rights to Judea and Samaria go back thousands of years. The U.S. should stop using the politically charged term West Bank to refer to the biblical heartland of Israel. The Israeli people have an undeniable and indisputable historical and legal claim over Judea and Samaria. At this critical moment in history, the United States must reaffirm this, says Congresswoman Claudia Tenney from New York. She says this bill reaffirms Israel's rightful claim to its territory and remain committed to defending the integrity of the Jewish state and fully supporting Israel's sovereignty over Judea and Samaria.
See, so they're using the same script from early December. They got their lines exactly right, because that's the exact same quote that we just read in the reintroduction of this bill. You know, I have to say, I mean, I think West Bank is fair to the Palestinians, and so I support that. If we had to rename it to trigger Ben Shapiro, I would call it the wet-ass bank. I think that would be just to trigger him. I think the Palestinians would go for that.
Well,
we say, listen. We know it's important, but listen, it would really trigger Ben Shapiro if we rename this the wet ass bank.
I think what we should really do is start a campaign. We're going to call it the Make Israel Greece Again campaign.
Yeah.
And it's all going to be based on the arguably greater historical claim to Israel if we're basing all this on who was there when and for how long. You could argue Greece has a better historical claim to Israel than the Jews do. You could argue that Persia has a better, or Iran, its successor state, has a better claim than Jews do. You could argue that Italy, Rome, has a better claim. Rome was there for a very long time than Jews do. The whole idea, and really this is what it boils down to, and so many Zionists are secular. They always have a very hard time when you point this out to them. You're basing your claim on religion. You're saying because of the Bible, your claim is unique. Of all the people who have lived in that region and claimed it as part of their territory, you're saying yours has primacy because of a religion that tells that story. Like, that's it. It's
right,
it's a biblical claim that you're making. No, well, I was arguing with a Zionist the other day. They said, where do we face when we pray? Okay. So, I mean, how are you really any different from the kind of fanatical Christians that people like you usually hate?
Well, of course.
Like, how are you different? You're talking about to justify the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of people. You're talking about the Bible. Listen, if your religion is so fragile philosophically that that's what you need to do to preserve it, maybe it's not a very good religion. Now, I'm not saying that about the religion, because I don't believe that that's the case. I don't believe Judaism needs Israel to function, as the people out there supporting the Palestinians, as Rebbe Weiss, who we got to interview in Chicago, would certainly argue, as most Jews argued. The Reformed Temple did not recognize Israel until the 90s. Most Jews thought Zionism was a crackpot scheme. It wasn't until after the Holocaust that they were able to get enough Jews behind it to actually make a country out of it.
All right. Well, does this get better? No, this gets even worse.
Oh,
it
man,
gets even worse. Netanyahu heads to Washington to meet Trump, hoping to redraw Middle East. That's right. Netanyahu should be in America right now. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu left on Sunday early in the morning for Washington, where he is to meet later this week with U.S. President Donald Trump, declaring before boarding his flight that cooperation with the new administration could redraw the Middle East. So here he is before boarding the plane for America.
For a very important meeting with President Trump in Washington. The fact that this would be President Trump's first meeting with a foreign leader since his inauguration is telling. I think it's a testimony to the strength of the Israeli-American alliance. It's also a testimony to the strength of our personal friendship. That friendship and that cooperation has already yielded important results for Israel in the Middle East, including the historic Abraham Accords that President Trump led and which brought 4 historic peace treaties between Israel and its Arab neighbors. In this meeting, we'll deal with important issues, critical issues facing Israel and our region. A victory over Hamas, achieving the release of all our hostages, and dealing with the Iranian terror axis and all its components, an axis that threatens the peace of Israel, the Middle East, and the entire world. The decisions we made in the war have already changed the face of the Middle East. Our decisions and the courage of our soldiers have redrawn the map. But I believe that working closely with President Trump, we can redraw it even further and for the better. I believe that we can strengthen security, broaden the circle of peace, and achieve a remarkable era of peace through strength. Thank you very much.
We just have to kill all of our neighbors.
That's right. As the prime minister departed to Washington, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich called him to strengthen our grip and sovereignty over the West Bank, while describing Trump as a lover of Israel. The Palestinians want the West Bank, which is controlled by Israel and includes some 140 Israeli settlements, as part of a future state. We must strengthen our grip and sovereignty over the homeland in Judea and Samaria, he said, using the biblical name for the West Bank, which, of course, the Republicans are now trying to put into law, that we recognize that as well. Smotrich has threatened to bolt the government if the war is not restarted, while fellow far-right party Otzma Yehudit, wow, that guy's so far-right, we haven't heard of him until now, Otzma Yehudit, has already left the coalition in protest of Israel, like a Pat Buchanan of Israel. You know, no, you don't hear of him too often. Has already left the coalition in protest of the deal. Without Smotrich's religious Zionism party, the government would lose its majority in the Knesset. The day before he sits down with Trump, Netanyahu is to hold a meeting with the envoy, Witkoff, who's the guy who strong-armed him into making the first phase of the deal, to initiate talks on the second stage of the hostage release deal with Hamas, which are slated to begin that day, the Prime Minister's office said Saturday. Witkoff was deeply involved in the ceasefire negotiations even before Trump's January 20th inauguration. Reports have increasingly indicated, however, that Netanyahu is seriously entertaining the possibility of resuming the war after the first phase of the deal, as the far-right members of his governing coalition have demanded, rather than continuing on to the second phase. So, add all of that together, folks, and the Israel First agenda has arrived. You have Netanyahu coming to meet with Donald Trump. They are going to figure out a way to get Israel more land, more settlements. They're going to try to get to phase two, but look at the pressure that Netanyahu is facing from his own government not to get to phase two. Netanyahu has already expressed great skepticism they'll get this phase two, as has Donald Trump. Add to that extremely draconian crackdowns on speech here at home for anybody who has a problem with any of this. You have the government now trying to codify into their own language the West Bank, which is the big prize. The West Bank's about 10 times larger than Gaza in terms of land area. That's the prize Israel really wants. The United States government wants to essentially recognize that as Israel's. Well, what do you think follows from that? What do you think follows from that? They're already attacking Palestinians in the West Bank, the settlers who the sanctions have been lifted from. So add all of that together. And yes, turns out there was not much hope for Donald Trump sticking his thumb in the eye of the Israeli government after all.
Yeah, and then when these people hate their murderers, the people who are murdering their family and their neighbors, you call them anti-Semitic?
Right.
I mean, Israel represents itself as a Jewish ethno-state. So, yeah, I'm sure it comes out like that. But hey, you got a lot of people here who hate people that didn't even do anything to them. Yeah, they're rounding them up. They're rounding them up. How would you feel about those people if you heard about one of these people who did something to somebody in another state that you don't know, that you never met, and you hate these people?
Well, I didn't include this.
Imagine these people were oppressing your people.
I didn't include this in the presentation because it turned out to have been an older video. But there was a video that spread far and wide on the internet of a Chinese student being arrested, and some tweets presented it as well. It's kind of weird. So what happened was there was this Chinese student who's being arrested on camera
May last year
at Fox News. Well, that footage was from May, but then there were some reports and some outlets, some pretty small outlets. I don't know. I haven't been able to confirm it, so I didn't feel confident enough to run with it. But there were some outlets that say that person has now been deported, but they couldn't confirm that. So that video was not of the arrest, but that person has since been deported. Again, that's not verifiable, so we don't know that. Right. But it sure spread like wildfire on X. And boy, were a lot of the chuds jumping for joy. Charlie Kirk even tweeted that out. Pretty big account, right?
That's why I thought it was real, because I quote tweeted it. Yeah. And then what? You warned me, right?
Yeah, well,
you didn't think it was real, so I pulled it down.
Yeah, I found out that was an old video and that the facts of the story were shaky. But yeah, you had Charlie Kirk saying, yeah, she can go back to China and protest for Palestine.
Oh, no, it wasn't you. It was Turncoat Dan.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it was, I mean, the point is you have guys like Charlie Kirk thinking that's a real thing of a student being deported who's here on a visa for protesting, saying, well, now you can go back to China. Like, this is not a free speech friendly movement. They never were.
Well, of course not. And this is why I say once again, look, if you're a right wing person who likes all that, well, you got what you wanted. What can I say, man? If you're on the left and you're trying to fucking go down on Tulsi, that's an embarrassment, man. That's an embarrassment. This administration is a fascist administration. And they are literally, if you look at what they did with Elon Musk, just going in and taking over these payment systems with no authorization, no authority. There's no legal framework for somebody with no authority to just go. And they just went ahead and did it. Trump's not allowed to fire people from the National Labor Relations Board, but he did it. Who's going to stop me, right? So what do you think the implications of that are for speech? What do you think this freaking rogues gallery he's putting together of Patel and Bondi and Tulsi, what do you think they're going to do? You think they're going to speak out for the rights of student protesters? Did you see Tulsi in the video I showed in the earlier segment? What do you think they're going to do? What do you think they're going to do? And if you're actually on the left, or if you're even on the right, but you've been speaking out for Palestine, we have a lot of MAGA people who have been with us on that. That's part of what brought them to our show. What are you going to do? Yeah, it was a crime under Biden. It was going to be a crime under Harris. You're okay with it now? Now it's all right? These guys are going to be worse, much worse. We always knew that. We always knew this is probably what they're going to do. I would have been surprised if they didn't. Like, in what world would they have come in and said, no, we have to protect the free speech rights of protesters? Everybody knew this.
No, those settlements are illegal. No.
Yeah, now you're all excited because Tulsi said some true shit about Ukraine.
Right.
Really? That's all it took to buy you off, which again, I say, well, I mean, you had things about Harris that could have bought you off, right? They probably wouldn't have done this. Like, they probably would not have treated, they probably would not have gone to this extreme of speech suppression. Probably would have been more of the same, which was not good, but they wouldn't have gone to this extreme. So why don't you just vote for them? Like, if you're that negotiable in your politics, if you're that lesser of two evil oriented, like, why did you even make a big stink for the last year and a half? I don't understand.
Well, one of the things that, one of the really, fascistic elements of this that's a trademark is using the mob to go after the target, right? Whether it's bounty hunters in Mississippi that they're going to try to enlist to chase the immigrants down, or now, hey, we put out the word that if you're here on a student visa and you protest for Palestine, you can be dragged out. Well, then you have, just completely deranged psychos like the Betar movement go out and try and film people at these protests to get them thrown out, tagging ICE. Hey, we're going to be here. That to gin up the mob, to turn the mob on the scapegoat.
Yes.
That is one of the trademarks of fascism, and it's absolutely here.
And if you notice, now that Trump's in power, you're seeing much more of the right wing that would not buy into Trump's make Israel great again shit are going along with it. Now they're going along with it because he owns it now. Right. Now he really owns it. So what are they going to do? Argue with the boss? I'm sorry, man. At this historical moment, it's funny. Like, I'm watching the genesis of how people become fascists. Like, even people who had once been on the left. I'm watching how people get seduced into fascism, because that's a very common story. Look, all those neocons. They used to be like left wingers, communists, Marxists, right? Like, you're watching how people gradually get drawn into fascism.
Well, yeah. Well, at a certain point, I think it becomes the most effective way to wield power. You know,
right.
Well, back when we interviewed, it was years ago, we interviewed Burgess on his Hitchens book.
In the end, they get tired of being on the outside looking in, man.
Well, also you could lose faith in a lot. Like one of his theories for why, you know, Christopher Hitchens, who was a, you know, man of the left, who was a socialist his whole life, why he became a neocon is because he gave up on the power of revolutionary socialism. He realized that was really just not a viable vehicle for transformation, whereas the United States military was. So if this giant behemoth could be somehow wielded for positive change, that's at least a hope, because the instruments has the necessary clout to actually influence the world, whereas revolutionary socialist movements don't. And I thought that was an interesting interpretation, because at a certain point, if you lose hope, you turn to you know,
that's it.
What you think can win, right? You know, I mean, this is
at least it's something.
Exactly. MAGA is viable at this moment. What else is viable? What else? Certainly the Democrats aren't viable. I wouldn't vote for the Democrats even if they were viable. So what else is there? Right. And you know, I think a lot of people are naturally drawn in by the allure of being able to influence things, being able to do things. Look, Libertarian Party says we freed Ross Ulbricht. We saved his life. If Harris had won, he'd have been rotting in a jail cell for the rest of his life. We wielded this influence on Trump, and he won, and we got something for that. And that's all well and good. I think you should, at that point, call yourself a PAC that occasionally endorses Republicans and occasionally sits it out. I don't think you should present as a third party.
You're not a libertarian party.
Right. You're not a third party. But if that's your philosophy, okay. That's fair enough. Like that's totally legitimate to be that. I just think you should probably like present yourself as that. But what comes with that?
You know,
all of this.
Call yourself the Reifenstalls.
Yeah, right. For the heart. What comes with that is all of this, right? Because this is the viable vehicle at the moment.
Please clap.